Have you ever watched a place lose its soul, not in a single moment, but piece by piece, so slowly you almost didn't notice, until one day everything felt colder? Brinkhaven was once the kind of town people spoke about with a soft smile, a town where front porches creaked beneath rocking chairs, where kids chased fireflies past bedtime, and where folks slept with their doors unlocked, not out of naivety, but out of trust. Trust in their neighbors, trust in the law. But time can twist even the most peaceful places. Hey friend, before we get too deep, how are you holding up today? You and your family safe? I pray peace over your household and strength in whatever season you're walking through. Now come with me, because this story, this warning, is one we all need to hear. Today, Brinkhaven feels like a ghost of its former self. The streets still bear the same names, but the warmth, the trust, that's gone. Now when a patrol car rolls by, conversations don't pause. They die. People whisper, eyes darting. Shopkeepers don't worry about thieves anymore. They worry about the officers who collect protection money with a badge on their chest. And those who dare to speak out, they either vanish or find themselves locked away on charges that don't make sense because they were never meant to. Justice in Brinkhaven, it isn't a right, it's a luxury. It's bought, sold, traded. The men in uniform don't protect, they dictate. They decide who walks free, who rots, and who simply disappears. There are no rules, no consequences. The law bends. No, it kneels to those who know how to play the game. And if you don't play, you're removed from the board. Her name wasn't always one people whispered. Back then, she was just Naomi Ellison, a girl with a quiet fire and a dream so stubborn it refused to die. Naomi didn't grow up wanting power, she wanted purpose. She believed the badge stood for something sacred, for fairness, for standing in the gap when others couldn't. She carried that belief like a torch through the academy, through long nights and aching feet, through her first beat, her first arrest, her first moment in uniform. She believed she was there to protect, to serve, to uphold the law. And for a while, she held on to that hope, even when the cracks began to show. A case dismissed for lack of evidence, even when the evidence was clear. A suspect mysteriously released. Just hours before trial, witnesses recanting their stories overnight, with eyes full of fear. Naomi told herself it was miscommunication, a fluke, but deep down, something tugged at her. And then came the moment she couldn't ignore. She had questioned a fellow officer about surveillance footage that had disappeared from an open case. His response? A smirk, cold. "You've got a lot to learn, Ellison," he said. "We don't enforce the law, we control it." The words didn't echo, they embedded. She stood there, spine tight, lips pressed together. This wasn't the oath she took. This wasn't service, it was something darker, something rotted. In Brinkhaven, loyalty didn't mean truth. It meant silence. And the unspoken rule wrapped itself around her like a chain. Fall in line or fall alone. So Naomi stood at a crossroads, one paved by every woman before her who had faced the same impossible choice. Stay silent, keep the badge, survive the game, or speak and risk everything, her career, her freedom, her life. But she knew one thing for certain. If she made the wrong move in a department built on fear, she wouldn't get a second chance. So the question lingered quietly in her chest. Would she stand up before it was too late? The call came just after sunset, a minor disturbance near a corner store. Nothing urgent, nothing that should have mattered. But that night changed everything. Naomi pulled up to the scene and stepped out of her cruiser. The air was thick, not with heat, but with tension, like the street itself was holding its breath. A man lay face down on the pavement, his wrists bound tightly behind his back, breathing ragged, body trembling beneath the knee of a fellow officer. His name was Deshaun Brooks. Around them, a small crowd had gathered, not shouting, not interfering, just watching, silent, resigned. They'd seen this before. Officer Donnelly stood over the man, radiating authority like a badge made of iron instead of brass. "Resisted arrest," he said flatly, without looking up. "Got aggressive when we asked for ID." Naomi's eyes dropped to Deshaun's face. A fresh cut ran across his lip. Blood traced the curve of his mouth, but it wasn't pain that struck her. It was his eyes, locked onto hers, not pleading for help, but for truth. "See me," they said. "See what's really happening." Naomi's heart beat faster. Across the street, a security camera blinked above the store entrance. She glanced up at it, then back at Donnelly. If he was telling the truth, the footage would show it. If not, she didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene. She just walked back to her cruiser, face unreadable, hands steady. But inside, her gut twisted. She already knew what she'd find. Hours later, long after the station had gone quiet and the hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence, Naomi sat alone at her desk. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She pulled up the footage, pressed play, and watched everything unravel. Deshaun hadn't resisted. He'd been standing calm outside the store, hands in his pockets. The officers approached, words exchanged. He raised his hands, open, non-threatening. Then they grabbed him. No warning, no hesitation. They slammed him against the wall. Fists flew. A knee drove into his ribs. His head hit the pavement, hard. Naomi leaned back, her breath shallow. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was brutality. This was a message. She could let it go. Sign off the report as written, pretend she hadn't seen a thing, or she could tell the truth. She squared her shoulders, logged the footage into evidence, filed a supplemental report detailing what really happened, and printed it out with hands that refused to shake. She walked straight to Sergeant Cooper's office, laid the report on his desk. He barely looked at it. "This is already handled," he said. Naomi frowned. "Handled how?" Cooper leaned back in his chair with the ease of a man who'd long since stopped believing in right and wrong. "Brooks has priors, petty stuff. No one's going to question it." Her voice tightened. "That doesn't change what happened." "No," he said, "but it changes how we write it." The room fell still, heavy, loaded. She stood there, still as stone, hearing the words that weren't said. "You're not here to serve the truth, Ellison. You're here to protect the story." Naomi left the office, but the weight of the moment followed her. She stayed late that night, her mind racing. Because this wasn't just one bad arrest. It wasn't one bad report. It was a pattern. And when she started digging, the pattern became a blueprint, a machine. The deeper Naomi dug, the darker it got. Night after night, she sat alone beneath the cold blue glow of her monitor, sifting through incident reports, arrest records, internal memos that didn't quite match. And like a song on a loop, the same themes emerged. Surveillance footage gone missing, witnesses retracting statements overnight, charges filed without evidence, and lives destroyed without question. It wasn't incompetence, it wasn't neglect. It was deliberate, surgical, a quiet, practiced erasure. Naomi leaned back in her chair, her breath trembling. This wasn't a few bad cops. This was design, a structure built to protect itself. And those who refused to look away, they disappeared from the system like dust swept under a rug. She wasn't just staring into corruption. She was staring into a machine. And the men running it, they didn't bend the law. They owned it. Then came the voice behind her, low, calm, enough to make her jump. You should stop. Naomi turned sharply. It was Officer Dean Carter, one of the older ones. Quiet, observant. He'd always been polite, distant, the kind of man who watched more than he spoke. But tonight there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Weariness, the kind that only comes from knowing too much. Naomi straightened her spine. What do you mean? He glanced at her screen, then back to her. You think you're the first? His voice was barely a whisper. You think no one else ever noticed? A hollow chuckle escaped him. You can't fix this place, Ellison. You can try, but it'll grind you down until you either give in or disappear. Naomi searched his face. Once, maybe, he'd believed in something too. Once, maybe, he'd fought and lost. But she wasn't ready to lose, not yet. And if they thought she'd just play along, just file the paperwork and shut her mouth, they didn't know her. Then one night, something changed. She was in the records room late, chasing a lead. Another case that didn't add up. Another file that had conveniently vanished. And that's when she saw her. A woman moving between shelves with silent purpose. Dark curls tucked behind one ear. Eyes sharp, posture alert. Tiana Rosewood. She worked in records, supposedly. But there was something different in the way she moved. She wasn't just filing. She was watching. Tracking. Every time Naomi accessed a corrupted case file, Tiana wasn't far. At first, she thought it was coincidence, but in Brinkhaven, coincidences didn't exist. One night, Naomi returned to the records room. It was nearly empty, quiet enough to hear the building breathe. She was looking for evidence, a pattern, a name, then footsteps, software deliberate. She turned. No one there, but on the desk in front of her, a single manila folder that hadn't been there before, and resting on top, a folded slip of paper. Naomi hesitated, then opened it. Neat handwriting, one sentence. If you really want to know the truth, meet me at Café number 13. Her heart skipped. She looked around. The room was empty, but she wasn't alone anymore. Café. Number 13 wasn't the kind of place you noticed. It was tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a laundromat that hadn't had a working dryer in years. No neon sign, no foot traffic, just chipped brick, clouded windows, and the faint smell of burnt coffee that seeped through the walls like memory. Naomi sat across the street in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but part of her knew. The moment she stepped through that door, there would be no going back. This was a line, and it would not blur. She crossed the street slowly. The night air was cool, but the tension wrapped around her shoulders like a wet coat. Inside, the cafe was nearly empty. A lone barista moved in lazy circles behind the counter. Muted jazz crackled from an old speaker. And in the farthest booth, in the shadow of a crooked light bulb, Tiana Rosewood was waiting. No coffee, no book, no phone, just stillness, just her, watching. Naomi slid into the booth across from her, heart pounding. Neither spoke. Tiana's eyes were steady, sharp but not hostile, calculating, cautious, like someone who had learned too well what trust costs. Finally, Naomi broke the silence. You left the note. Tiana's lips curved ever so slightly. And you came? Naomi leaned in, lowering her voice. Who are you? Tiana exhaled, rested her palms on the table. I work in records, she said. At least that's what the department thinks. Naomi tensed. The air thickened between them. Then came the truth. I'm with the FBI. The words hit like thunder in a silent canyon. Naomi's chest tightened. She'd suspected Tiana was different. But this? You're undercover. Tiana nodded once. Long enough. Naomi glanced toward the windows. Every passerby suddenly felt like a threat. Why are you telling me this now? Tiana studied her. You filed a report that made people nervous. You've been asking questions, connecting dots you weren't supposed to see. She paused. You're at a crossroads, Ellison, and you don't have long. Naomi swallowed hard. I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize how close they were watching. You have no idea, Tiana said softly. Kowalski runs the department like his own private empire. Donnelly, Price, they're his muscle. But the problem isn't just them, it's the silence that protects them. Naomi clenched her fists beneath the table. And what? You want me to help you? Become your inside woman? Tiana didn't flinch. We need someone who sees the truth, who's still on the inside. We have pieces, but we need proof. Naomi's breath caught. It wasn't flattery, it was pressure. And she felt it, heavy as armor. The badge she had fought to earn, the uniform she once wore with pride, now felt like a disguise. If she said yes, she wasn't just risking her career. She was putting a target on her back. But if she said no, she'd be no different than the ones who looked away. Naomi looked up, her voice soft but steady. What do you need me to do? They didn't shake hands. There was no contract, just a quiet look exchanged across a scratched-up cafe table, and the understanding that from this moment on, Naomi Ellison was at war. She didn't go in guns blazing, didn't storm offices or shout into microphones. No, the battlefield she stepped into required something more dangerous than brute force. Patience, stealth, discipline. She started with what she could reach. Late nights at the precinct after the hum of voices and boots on tile faded into silence, she combed through files, case by case, looking for the thread. And she found it. Large, unexplained payments labeled as community partnerships. Fines charged to mom and pop shops for violations that didn't exist. Then mysteriously dropped after a private meeting with Captain Kowalski. The department wasn't just corrupt, it was profitable, a racket with a badge. But paper trails weren't enough. Naomi knew the system could make those disappear. It had done so before. She needed to hear it, capture it, prove it. So she began wearing a wire, a tiny recorder tucked inside the inner seam of her uniform. It wasn't much, but it was everything. And what she caught? It wasn't small talk. In the break room, 2 officers joking about planting drugs on a protester. At a bar, someone bragging about threatening a woman into withdrawing a complaint. In the hallways, laughter over how easy it was to clean up after a messy arrest. Each clip, each quote, each whispered confession. Stacked like bricks in a wall Naomi was building against them. For a moment, it felt like she was gaining ground. She was outsmarting them, outrunning them, until she realized she wasn't the only one watching. It happened in the locker room. Her shift had just ended, her mind still buzzing from what she'd captured the night before. A phone call between Kowalski and a lieutenant, discussing hush money. She reached for her bag. Then, "You need to stop, Ellison." The voice wasn't loud, but it sliced clean. She turned. Officer Ryan Torres. For years, he'd been one of the few she trusted. They'd backed each other up on calls, shared coffee, war stories, small talk. If anyone had her back, it should have been him. But the look in his eyes, not friendly, not angry, just tired. Like someone who'd watched too many people drown and stopped throwing life jackets. "I don't know what you're talking about," Naomi said quietly. Torres shook his head. "Don't lie, not to me." He glanced around. "You're not the first to try. You think you're going to be the first to win?" She didn't answer, didn't have to. Torres rubbed a hand down his face. "You don't get it. They always find out. And when they do, you don't get to walk away." Naomi's jaw tightened. And what about you? He gave a bitter smile. I stopped fighting a long time ago. She watched him go. A man who once stood for something, now just part of the wallpaper. She should have been scared, and she was. But beneath that fear, a fire was building. She wasn't done, not yet. That night, she stepped into the parking garage, jacket zipped, nerves stretched thin. The lot was nearly empty. The overhead lights flickered, one out completely, one blinking like a warning. That's when she saw it. Headlights parked, not moving, engine off, watching. She didn't pause, didn't look back, just walked fast but controlled toward her car. Turned the corner and froze. Footsteps, software measured, not hers. She reached for her keys, then a hand slammed onto her shoulder, an arm around her throat. A voice at her ear, low and laughing. You think you can take down Kowalski? You're a pawn, Ellison. And pawns, they get sacrificed first. Naomi's instincts kicked in. She slammed her elbow back, felt the crack of impact, heard a grunt. She twisted, broke free, stumbled back, heart pounding. And then she saw him. Officer Gregson, a man she'd trained with, laughed with, trusted. Now, his face was twisted with fury, like he wasn't even human anymore, just a weapon. She braced herself, but before he could move again, a sharp whistle, then impact. Gregson went flying. Tiana Rosewood stepped out of the shadows, calm as a mountain. Damn, she muttered, brushing dust from her sleeve. You okay? Naomi could barely speak. Tiana's eyes swept the lot. They're not just watching anymore, she said. They're making their move. Naomi nodded, her breath still uneven. She wasn't naive. She'd known this road was dangerous. But now it was survival. She looked at Tiana, her voice barely a whisper. I can't do this alone. Tiana nodded once. You won't have to. The courtroom pulsed with tension long before the judge walked in. Every seat was filled. Reporters, community leaders, off-duty officers. Some came for the story, some came for the reckoning, but all came for one reason, to see if the untouchable could finally be touched. At the defense table sat Captain Raymond Kowalski. He didn't look worried, he looked bored. Tailored suit, gold cufflinks, that same crooked smirk he always wore, like the whole thing was an inconvenience. Beside him sat his loyal hounds, Lieutenant Donnelly and Sergeant Price, men who had silenced witnesses, shredded reports, beaten the truth out of anyone who dared speak it. And across the room sat Naomi, hands clasped, eyes steady, but her knuckles were white with pressure. She had gathered every piece of this case, brick by crumbling brick. She had worn the wire, had risked her life. But now, facing Kowalski's calm arrogance, she couldn't help but wonder, was it enough? The defense lawyer rose first, slick, expensive, a professional illusionist. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, voice smooth as oil, what we have here today is not justice, it's a witch hunt. Naomi's jaw tensed. He continued, walking slowly as if rehearsed in a mirror. My client, Captain Kowalski, has given over 20 years of service to this community. He's cleaned up the streets, locked away criminals, saved lives. She could barely contain herself. Saved lives? He had destroyed them. The lawyer gestured toward the prosecution's table, where stacks of files waited. And now, because of a few accounting errors, he paused for effect. They want you to believe this man is a monster. A few jurors shifted in their seats. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. This wasn't about truth. It was about control. And Kowalski still believed he had it. Then the prosecutor rose. Older, grounded. A man who didn't believe in theater, only in facts. No smoke, no mirrors, he said simply. No stories, just proof. He laid it out. Financial records, video evidence, sworn testimony, bribes, cover-ups, systematic obstruction of justice. Kowalski didn't just bend the law, the prosecutor said. He bought it. Naomi watched the jury closely. Some leaned in, some folded their arms. But they were listening, and so was Kowalski. For the first time, his smirk cracked, just slightly. But Naomi saw it. Then Tiana stood. She approached the evidence table, pulled out a small black recording device. "Your Honor," she said, "the prosecution wishes to submit one final piece of evidence." The judge nodded. "Proceed." She pressed play, static. Then a voice, Kowalski's voice. "You don't get it, do you? We don't enforce the law. We control it." The courtroom fell dead silent. A gasp rippled through the rows. The jury stiffened. Even Donnelly turned pale. And Kowalski? He stopped drumming his fingers. His smirk died. His head turned slowly toward his lawyer. But his lawyer had nothing, no excuse, no magic trick, because in that moment the truth had a voice, and it was his. Kowalski stood suddenly, papers scattered. He shoved his chair back, barreled toward the side exit. The room erupted, gasps, shouts, guards scrambling. But Naomi was already moving. She ran. Hard, not just with duty, but with everything she'd buried. Every victim, every erased name, every time she was told to look away. She caught him in the lobby, tackled him hard, felt his weight slam to the floor. He twisted, hissed, fought. But she had more than strength, she had purpose. She cuffed him tight and unshaken. Then she leaned close and whispered, "You can bend the law, but justice still remembers." When the doors burst open, the world finally saw the real man behind the myth. Not a savior, not a captain, just a criminal in cuffs. And this time, there was no escape. The headlines came fast. Brinkhaven police captain arrested on corruption charges. Officers Donnelly and Price indicted following FBI probe. Years of silence broken in one explosive trial. But Naomi didn't smile. She didn't raise a fist or bask in victory. She just stood outside the courthouse, hands in her pockets, watching, flashing cameras, reporters calling her name, people asking for statements. But inside she felt hollow, because truth doesn't come free, and justice doesn't come clean. Brinkhaven had changed. Oh, not in banners or parades, but in stares, in silence, in the way conversation stopped when she walked by. Some called her a hero, others, a traitor. She had cracked the wall, but the foundation still held. There were still names buried, still voices silenced, still officers in uniform who whispered her name like a warning. And she knew. She couldn't stay. She had burned too many bridges, shined too bright a light, so she left, not in shame, not in fear, but because her fight wasn't here anymore. 1 week later, a small diner on the edge of nowhere, sticky table, cheap coffee, the kind of place where no one asked your name unless you wanted them to. Naomi sat alone, stirring cream into a cup she wasn't drinking. Her badge was gone, her uniform boxed away. But the weight of everything she carried, still there. Then a shadow fell across the table. "Officer Ellison?" She looked up. It was Deshaun Brooks, the man who had been cuffed face down on that street, the man whose eyes had once begged her to see him. He smiled, just a little. "I just wanted to say thank you." Naomi blinked, caught off guard, but she understood. He wasn't just thanking her for himself. He was thanking her for all of them, the forgotten, the framed, the beaten, the erased. She nodded once, quietly. "You take care of yourself," she said. "You too." And he was gone. That night, a young reporter caught up with her outside the courthouse. He looked barely old enough to shave, held a mic like it might bite him, but he asked the question they all wanted to know. "Do you think you've won?" Naomi looked at him for a long moment. then turned, looked straight into the camera. Her voice didn't tremble. "No," she said. "This is just the beginning. Justice doesn't show up on its own. You have to fight for it every single day." She held his gaze, then walked away, because the fight wasn't over, and for women like Naomi, it never really is. Hey, family, if this story moved you, if it made you think, made you feel, made you remember, don't just scroll past. Leave a comment. Tell us, have you ever stood for something when it could have cost you everything? We want to hear your voice. Subscribe to Black Women for more real, powerful, untold stories just like this. Because these stories, they aren't fiction. They're echoes of what too many of us live through every single day. We honor the fighters. We remember the silenced. And we keep going. Together.